This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 407, entitled Duty to Posterity. Description. This video provides suggestions on how demographic politicians, that is DPs, can persuade men to be fathers again to ensure the birth rate goes over 2.1 children per woman. In the post-masculist, post-gender political era, creating a U-turn in the willingness of men to be fathers, after an initial unwillingness that is needed to return the world population to a much lower figure to solve the global warming problem, then reversing it so that humanity is not wiped out. A key concept in this U-turn will be government-sponsored social engineering that pushes the concept of the duty to posterity, that is, the need to create and nurture the happiness of the next few generations, that is posterity, a responsibility of both sexes and everyone. The flyer itself. Duty to Posterity by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. A lot of the titles of my Masculist flyers are not self-evident, so I am obliged off the bat to give a definition of what I mean by them. In this case, the label and concept of duty to posterity means that both sexes in the post-masculist, post-gender political age will be morally obliged to have kids, so that the replacement rate of 2.1 kids per woman is reached, so that populations do not get wiped out. This flyer presents ideas on how that replacement rate can be achieved. I'm looking into the future and thinking, I like looking into the future and thinking about what future times will be like, what their problems will be, and how they might be resolved. I have a track record of doing this. For example, my first book, on the species dominance debate, in brackets, whether humanity should build godlike massively intelligent machines, published in 2005, is still decades ahead of its time, predicting that a major war over the issue of whether human beings or machines should be the most intelligent species. There are still very few sages in the AI field who hold similar views. My second book, on the rise of the fully democratic global state, in brackets, GLOBA, published in 2010, discusses a topic that remains in the intellectuals crying in the wilderness phase. I talk about 5 phases of awareness of a problem. Phase 0 equals no awareness by anyone. Phase 1 equals intellectuals, in brackets, sages, crying in the wilderness. Phase 2 equals interest groups. Phase 3, mainstream media exposure. Phase 4, political action. My third book, a collation of some 400 plus of these masculist flyers, in brackets, although I'm thinking seriously of writing a condensed version of about 150 pages in the year 2021, close brackets, is on masculism, a rebellion by men against being man-slaves to women, is probably in phase 2, since in 2021 the mainstream media have yet to take up masculist ideas in a big way, teaching the masses of masculist ideas. At the time of writing, there is a massive imbalance concerning awareness of gender political problems, with most people of both sexes suffering the delusion that gender oppression is a one-way street, that is, that only women are gender politically oppressed, and by men. The opposite idea is currently so far out of people's consciousness that presenting the masculist case to the media and to feminists is like preaching second-wave feminism to the housewives of the mid-60s who would have suffered cognitive dissonance on hearing such radical ideas such as careers for women. Despite the fact that masculism is still only in phase 2 at the time of writing, 2021, I'm convinced that masculist theorists will quickly dominate the gender political stage, since whenever men turn their minds to something, they always dominate it, for the simple reason that men are genetically superior to women when it comes to intelligence and motivation at the top end of the performance scale. Masculist theorists like to point out that men are smarter than women, because men's average IQ score is 4 IQ points higher than women's. That men's IQ variance is 10% larger than women's, so that the morons and the genii are males, so that men have won 99% of the science Nobel Prizes. Men have 10% larger brains, hence have 10 billion more neurons than women, hence a 10% larger neuronal processing capacity than women, and 10 times the level of testosterone in their blood than women. So are a lot more aggressive, ambitious, dogged, persistent, so finish difficult tasks a lot more readily than women, so have a vastly superior achievement track record than women, which is why everyone has heard of the term great man, but the term great woman sounds almost like an oxymoron. Thus, now that the masculist theorists are providing the world with masculist ideas, masculist rhetoric, it's only a question of time before millions of men will be interested in and be influenced by these masculist ideas, and will be intellectually armed by them, which will give them the means, the tools, to not only fight back the monoconscious, sexist, hypocritical tyranny of the MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, but will be able to crush them with masculist science. The more these MFBs object to what the masculist theorists are saying, the more vociferously will these theorists attack the MFBs, claiming that these MFBs are Isaianate fairies, living in a fairyland, believing what they want to believe without scientific evidence, hence are free to believe whatever they like. For example, the tooth fairy. This makes these Isaianate, innumerate, fluffy feminists as unbelievable as religionists or flat earthers. In the coming years, this decade, the masculists will intellectually crush the feminists, seeing the fluffy feminists in the divorce courts as indirect genociders, so will be merciless with them, crushing them verbally, and if that doesn't work, in the limit, with bullets, since responsible males, masculist soldiers, will not tolerate that these fluffy feminist hypocrites indirectly wipe out whole populations, as they are currently doing, since with their 10% smaller brained, gender political short-sightedness, they have taken over the divorce courts and made divorce so toxic for men that in many countries now two-thirds of young men refuse to marry and reject paternity. Thus these fluffy feminists who want equal rights for women in the parliaments but reject equal obligations with men in the divorce courts by not bothering to FIP up, that's become financially independent persons, by bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and college, expect men to be man-slaves to pay for women after the divorce the way they did before the divorce. Masculists put enormous moral pressure on fluffies, in brackets, equals traditional women who expect to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man. Masculists state that it was men who liberated women from household drudgery by giving women the contraceptive pill, science-based medicine, household gadgets, a female life expectancy well into the 80s, so now that women can work, they must work, since anything else is man-slavery, and to masculists, man-slavery is slavery, and slavery is hated, which is why masculists have such hatred of fluffies, who are seen as man-slavers. Masculists have an even greater hatred of fluffy feminists in the divorce courts, since it's bad enough that these women are fluffies and hence manslavers. But they are also hypocrites, as explained above, and it is this hypocrisy that makes them even more reviled by masculists. Intellectually armed with such masculist arguments, plus an awareness of the greatest sexual discrimination that exists, namely the lack of the paternity rejection right, whereas women have the mara. Millions of near-future masculists will be able to beat the feminists at their own game, intellectually crushing them with masculist science, intellectually destroying the conceptual bases of most of feminist doctrine, for example, by saying that the patriarchy, that's general male political and social dominance, is largely female caused as a side effect of women's hypergamy, that is, the female instinct to mate up, sexually selecting superior men to mate with to get their superior DNA for women's kids, so that the kids have superior DNA compared to their mothers, which is good for the species. With women sexually selecting smarter men and taller, bigger, stronger, fiercer men over thousands of generations, it's not surprising that men are smarter than women, hence dominate society. Another major cause of the patriarchy, that is general male dominance, is men's 10% larger IQ variance and men's 10 times higher testosterone levels than women, so are hugely more driven to achieve. Women don't stand a chance when competing with men at the top end of the performance scale. That's just science, which can be hurled at the insensate and innumerate ignorance of most feminists, who in most cases studied fluffy crap majors at high school and college, so ended up with fluffy crap diplomas that are worth little in the marketplace, so that these fluffy crapper feminists then look around for some gullible manslave in her 30s, to pay for her to live in a middle-class house, raising her kids and having him pay for it all. These days are dying as the masculists and MGTOWs, that's men going their own way, refuse to marry and have kids, since the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites who control the divorce courts have made divorce so toxic for men that 2/3 of young men now live instead the MGTOW lifestyle of refusing to marry, rejecting paternity and spending their money on themselves, retiring early so that they spend the rest of their lives doing what they want to do instead of being a manslave to a bloody fluffy parasite, now seen by the masculists as vermin, as manslavers, as slavers, to be exterminated slowly by being totally ignored, not even pumped and dumped, so that these fluffies have their genes removed from the gene pool by being forced to rot on the shelf, dying out slowly, rejected by men, being made manless, and hence are forced to be loveless, sexless, childless, and as masculinist ideas spread throughout the society, they'll be increasingly spat at as man-slaving vermin. All this will take probably a decade or more to play itself out. It takes time for the ideas of the sages, that's the intellectuals, who dream up the ideas, to influence interest groups, who then spread the ideas, so that the journalists take up the masculinist messages and spread them to the masses, the millions, so that large numbers of people can then take their ideas, their ideologies, into politics and get the laws changed. This is the end of part 1.